Hey guys, Stealth here. Today we're doing a replay from the West Germany deck that I created earlier. If you haven't seen the video on that deck, I have linked it in the description below so you can watch it at any time. Now we're starting out. I'm doing a 2v2. I'm playing with my friend YOLO versus Cosjul and Panopticon. And right now we're just starting out. My first objective is to capture Charlie out here in the north, because if you capture this sector you can see the strategic importance. It dominates a lot of the inner field and you get a lot more income once you have captured this zone. So this is where I'm heading first. To do that I'm using a couple of my Fallschirmjäger, 2 Fallschirmjäger and the Dornier 205, escorted by a couple of those Stinger helicopters, the BO-105P. Next up, my main force will arrive shortly after that, consisting of one group of ATGMs, one group of AA units, 2 groups of Panzer Grenadiers, a Leopard scout tank, a couple of Flak Panzer Jeopards, a Scout Lux, and a couple of Kylers. I'm also going to capture this sector because my ally has stated that he's going to hold Alpha for us. So let's get the game going. I'm speeding this up a little because the early start isn't that interesting usually. Now my ally is using a American Marines deck, so he has quite a bit of all-rounder vehicles, I usually call them, because they are decent all-round units. So I land in my city, which is actually now my city, with my Fallschirmjäger. And because there's not a single challenge to this zone, I decide to retreat the Fallschirmjäger to the edge of town and immediately put them back into the Dorniers so that I can relocate them somewhere else. Up in the front here I got my ATGMs. They are going to be looking over all of this area. They have a lot of coverage this way. My AA infantry is a little bit further to the back and I can move it to this building if I really need it. But once these ATGMs start firing, I'm expecting counterfire from mortars or other artillery, so I don't want to expose these Fliegerfausts just yet. On this side of town I have one group of Panzer Grenadiers and the other group is on this side in case they do a push over this bridge. My Kylers are a little bit further to the back, and these tanks, if you haven't seen them yet, they come with both a main gun, of course it's a tank, and an autocannon, which is very effective for taking down infantry and lighter vehicles. But for now I'm keeping them in the back. I don't really need them out front. And if you were to put your tanks out here, you only risk exposing them to ATGM fire from locations like that. Now my first play is with the Tornado ECR. You just missed it because I was discussing this sector right here. But what I did with the ECR was make a short run over the enemy lines to try and find any of their units early on. That Scout Leopard, which I brought in immediately from the start, I deployed in here, so it has a good overwatch on the main field. And I relocated my Fallschirmjäger to this side of town, and again bringing with them the escort from the Stinger helicopters. Right now it is just a matter of reinforcing the zones, and as you can see we are very weak in Echo and Foxtrot. And just to spend some time I deploy the Tornado ECR again, my seaplane, and unfortunately my angle of approach is bad. I should have known that those bugs were there because they fired earlier on. But my Tornado, if you look at it, it only has a field of fire of about 15 degrees each side, so the plane is going this way. It can fire about 15 degrees that way and that way. It cannot really fire at these bugs, but as you can see when it was just about here where these first flares started popping, it launched a missile at something that is radar guided, which is in there. But I'm making a bad choice here and I only score 50 points, which is an awful trade, losing a 150 point plane to a 50 point win. So right now we're just reinforcing the lines. We got a couple of M11P or M1 IP Abrams coming up here. Some scouts from YOYO. He brought a couple of other standard M1 Abrams. And we're just taking command zones right now. Now as you may have gathered, the opposition wasn't the best. They were not very experienced players. So You could see that by them not actually taking Charlie, by them not really aggressively scouting Gulf and Hotel. So this for me was a clue that we were dealing with not very experienced players. Make a bit of a scout run with my looks, just to see if there's anything close to this bridge, but so far there's nothing here. And right now we're spotting everything with this Kiowa and my scout Leopard. Can see a couple of helicopters coming in here. A couple of Mi-24Vs. Now I was considering going after those with the BO-105s, but the thing is that these things, the Mi-24Vs, have a range of 2450 with their AA missiles. Mine have 2275. That will usually mean that these things are dead before they even get a chance to fire their missiles at the Mi-24V, so I'm not going through with my attack. Over here there is absolutely nothing coming into this town, which is unusual. Normally this town is quite the battlefield. But for now it's just very, very quiet. And because it is so quiet, I decide to bring in a couple more units. I have an artillery battery here in the back of 2 Panzer 109As. And a couple of mortar carriers coming up to reinforce the front lines and to pound anything that I can see here. These mortars have a range of 7 kilometers. Sorry, that's the Abrams. These mortar carriers, range of 7.7 kilometers, 5 HE power, so that's a lot of firepower for these things. They carry 57 rounds, so they can fire quite a bit of shells before they have to be rearmed. So again, not a lot going on. Let's skip to some more interesting parts. And this is something that occasionally happens when you're doing a destruction match. I know that some players who play Wargame don't really like the matches like this, like the destruction type, because it can get so static. And you actually see this happening right here, because there is nothing going on. There are some skirmishes, but mostly with artillery. He is spotting this helicopter group with his Kiowa, and they are all very, very close to the ground, which for my mortar carriers presents an ideal target. I lock on immediately, and you can see just how fast these things aim. Keep in mind, this is a one-time speed, this is not fastened or speed up. Over here I wanted to highlight that I deployed some fern spayers, and the fern spayers are going to be my main scouts in this bush here. I decided to deploy them here in this town, so I can then walk them over there. Even walking, these fern spayers still have a very, very good camo value. Whereas if I were to deploy these guys on the edge of this forest with the helicopter, I do not know if there's an AA unit in this forest, so I could lose there. So this is why it's a bit safer to get your Recon to the front line like this. And the fern spayers walk at 30 kph, so they really don't need a lot of time to get there. So here you can see a bit of shelling going on. This 163 is getting shelled, and these Bradleys haven't taken any fire yet. The helicopters apparently got noticed, or they noticed that they were taking fire. Some of them got panicked, but none of them got damaged, or at least none that we can see. So right now we have not actually killed anything yet. You can see all of them just backing off here. Quite experienced helicopters too. This is an elite Mi-24D. And this is, if I recall correctly, a transport. So this dropped off something elite either in this town or there or a little bit to the back. Or it's a regular attack helicopter, but I believe it's a transport. So I know that there is something elite in this town. Now in the meanwhile my artillery is taking some counter fire, so I move it a bit further away from the fob just to give it a bit of time to recover. Right over here, I'm trying to get to the other side of the water using another group of fern spayers in a CH-53. But these Mi-24Vs seem to want to pay a visit to this helicopter. So it's time to get out of here. I cannot safely make it across this water. Over here I'm forming a defensive line with a couple of Martyr VTS-1s. And these VTS-1s, you've seen them in my deck replay, or my deck guide if you've watched that. They are very cheap gun carriers. They don't do anything very well in armor wise, but they have a very nice gun. And at 25 points these things can make life for tanks and IFVs very difficult. And of course we're being backed up by even more Abrams. So I backed off with my Fallschirmjäger, they are back here. They backed off with their Mi-24V, so again, pretty much a standoff. And as you can see, we've been playing for 13 minutes. And in those 13 minutes, not a lot has happened. I lost my plane, which accounted for 150 of their points, and I scored one hit on an AA unit. But otherwise, there have not been any casualties on their side. Now at this point I was actually considering not even airing this replay, because right now it's just very boring to watch. But it does give me a bit of time to actually tell you what I'm doing. And over here we got something. Look, this is also an indication that they, I'm not going to say don't have a clue what they're doing, but that they could have played this thing better. They are flying right into all of my AA, and YOLO even has a chaparral here. So my Fliegerfausts are taking aim at this Yak 38 bomber, the Flak Panzer Jeopard is taking aim, and just watch what he drops and where he drops it. He is dropping napalm on the center of town. Now normally I would say this is a good move, but he doesn't know that there's anything in there. He doesn't know how much Recon or how much AA we have in here. So what he's doing here is a very risky play, and he gets punished. He loses the bomber. Whereas my Panzer Grenadiers don't take a scratch. Now because the fire is spreading slightly into my zone, I am getting out of this town for now. And if they would have pushed at this moment, my Panzer Grenadier would have been caught in the open. But that's just not happening now. They are just not taking any action on this flank yet. Now in the meanwhile, I still wanted to get those Fern Spayers, not these guys, but these guys in here to the other side of the water. And I remember that the Fox are actually amphibious units. They go quite fast in the water too, 53 kph. So what I'm going to do is try and float these guys across the water, get them to offload the Fern Spayers here, and then come back. And this is a bit safer, or at least I was hoping it was going to be a bit safer, because the helicopter, a helicopter landing here is very tricky. You can take AA fire from manpads in here, in this forest. They could have a long-range AA unit in this small forest line. They could have some AA in there. It was just too risky. In the meanwhile, YOLO is moving up with 12 mortar carriers. He really shelled every single unit in the game. And it really kept them on their toes. They really had to keep moving their units about. And it definitely helped with destroying some of the units later on. Over here he is doing an aggressive spot with a Bradley. And interesting enough, there is nothing shooting back at this Bradley. The fact that he can get out here unchallenged also tells me that these guys aren't very experienced. Because, for example, I would put some Recon in there. Maybe an ATGM carrier there, and doing that, cover off this entire flank. So we spot some of these guys using this Kiowa, and immediately the Mi-24 starts taking a lot of mortar fire from his mortars and my own. And the next target should be this Strela. Because keeping a Strela in the open like this, I don't think this counts as cover. No, it doesn't count as cover. So the Strela is just not stealth right now, and he's getting easily detected. In the meanwhile, on the left flank, my Fern Spayers have made it across the water, and they ran up against a couple of Igla Ns. So instead of getting my Fox out of there immediately, I decided to push in with the Fox and the Fern Spayers to get those guys out of the way, and to try and get my Fern Spayers in here. Now, in retrospect, the better choice would have been to get these guys back in the transport and get the hell out of here. Because this, a move like this, usually evokes a lot of response. You usually get a lot of bombers, helicopters, you can get some vehicles. Yeah, here we go. We get a ton of helicopters coming this way. Some of them are not identifiable yet, not from their tags, but if you recognize the unit, this is an Mi-8, and immediately the front spare gets wiped out. These Fuchs are swimming for their lives. I was going to say running, but they're actually swimming. And as you can see, just imagine being in this Fuchs and having that in your rear view mirror. Interestingly enough, they didn't push on to kill it. I didn't have any AA in here. My closest AA was actually all the way out here. So they could have really pushed into this zone and taken out that Fuchs. And meanwhile, we're taking some fire from a couple of tanks here on the other side. These Abrams are taking a lot of fire, and they are quite expensive too. These are the 145-point Abrams. So instead of taking an actual arty shell, or sorry, right now he is arty shelling this unit. But the next thing that YOLO does is very, very clever. He needs to cover these tanks because they are too important, they're too expensive to lose. So how do you cover a tank that's heavily damaged? How do you make sure that ATGMs don't get through? You deploy a smokescreen. And this completely blocks off any view to these Abrams from the other side. So the Abrams are now safe. Good play there from YOLO. Right now we're leading by 830 points versus 385, so we got about a 450 point advantage. But that is not going to last. My Fern Sprayer here up front in these bushes is spotting a couple of these concours. Now, these concours are of course very lightly armored targets, so they were proving to be excellent targets for mortars. The only thing I needed was a destination for these things. If you see something like this happening, there is usually only one place these things are going to go to, and that's that forest. I have absolutely no other destination for these things because you don't want them in the forest or in the town here. There's nothing for them there. But if you put them in this forest, you're going to be pushing ATGMs over this bridge, securing it against tanks, and even trying to take aim at something that might be hiding in there if you have good enough recon. So I was by now 100% sure that these things were going into this forest. And here you go. They veer off the road and they go into the forest. Very, very predictable. If you want to pull this off, it is possible, but come in from the other side. If you come in over this road, you go by this town or even through the town, micromanaging the units, and then push into the forest, I would not have a clue that these things were here. My Fern Sprayers would not be able to see through the forest, so they wouldn't spot the units. So if you want to ambush something, if you want to put up a defense here, come in from the rear, come in from behind, use the forest as cover for yourself. Right now we're bringing in some logistics. I'm bringing in my large CH-53 chopper, deploying it here because my ATGMs have fired all of their missiles and they are due for some reinforcements. We had a scout Bradley here and immediately he gets taken out by the VDV which are in this building, and combine that with a couple of mortars firing from pretty much all over the place. A couple down here and a couple back there I think. And this Bradley is quickly history. Something is also spotting these Abrams. Now of course Abrams aren't exactly stealthy tanks. They are 145 point poor stealthy units. So they really didn't have a lot of business being out here on the front line. If you want to have Abrams on the front line, at least park them in this forest, because that way they have at least a bit of cover against ATGMs and artillery. Now my flak panzers were up next, and this did give me a clue that there was something spotting me. I just wasn't sure what. I'm thinking there was some recon in this building or out here, but I'm not sure. They might have seen it earlier and just decided to flag it now. But let's switch to neutral view and let's see if I'm right. Let's see where their recon is. And here you go. Exactly where I had expected them to be. Spetsnaz VMF. Exceptionally stealthy units. This is the Russian counterpart to my Ferns player sniper team. And this is what is spotting all of these units. Now let's switch to their side. This is Panopticon. See what these guys can see. As you can see, they just saw the Flak Panzer Jeopards, they saw my Helos, and they saw his Cobra. In the meanwhile, quite a risky play with an F-11E Aardvark here, completely decimating this town, but not actually killing these guys yet. Now he also had a second recon team in here, the Spetsnaz GRU, which are very dangerous units. They have quite a decent amount of weaponry, combining assault rifles, AT weapons and a sniper rifle. And I would actually not put them in that town, in those buildings, because I think they would better serve out there, or out there as a recon team. From there you have a recon looking this way, and you have this recon looking that way. So right there you could stash some more solid infantry, some more defense infantry, or even ATGMs if you wanted to. Now as you can see, or as you might have noticed, I'm always keeping my mortars moving. The moment they fire a couple of shots, I move them. The moment they have done some pounding on this town, you move them. If you're not sure how to do this, if you might forget this, use the queuing orders maneuver, which is firing at a location, holding the shift key and then moving somewhere else. Now I was trying to get some airplanes to take the bait from this F4F KWS, but there are no airplanes right now who are dumb enough to come over our lines, which I was really hoping for. Nice view this, by the way. So he's just doing some aerial aerobatics and just getting a nice view of the battlefield, but not being actually challenged by anything out here. Now you can see that there's a ton of mortar fire coming from this side again, and this is all of these mortars from YOLO. It's tricky getting this many mortars together, and I wouldn't recommend it, but if you can get so many mortars firing at the same location, you're going to do a ton of damage. On the left flank I'm spotting with my Tiger. This is the Recon helicopter. Very expensive, 120 points, but it comes with stingers, snabs and hot ATGMs. Exceptional optics, and it did survive an AT or an HE weapon. You can see that by... hang on there, sir. You can see that by the fact that it has 8 strength and it only has 3 blocks of health left. That means that it got hit by something which is 5 points worth of HE damage, so that must have been a manpad. There is the possibility that this thing was hit by a SPAG, but I would have noticed that, and the only thing I noticed when I was playing this game was that there was something popping up from this town. So it was an AA weapon, a manpad. And if you conduct or if you deduce stuff like this, you can really try and figure out what is out there without even seeing the unit. And there you go, that was another AA missile going after that helicopter. I'm now signaling the YOLO that this is not a good idea and that these things are starting to take fire. But as you can see from the low, or from the high dispersion actually, that these things are not taking very accurate fire. Which means that it is probably larger scale artillery. It's not actually a mortar. A mortar would land more shells on target and a mortar would be a lot more accurate. Still, the mortars take quite a bad hit. And this was something of a surprise to me. He pushed across this river, across this bridge, with 2 very expensive tanks. These are the HA Abrams tanks. Not sure why he did this, because he had 0 recon here. The only thing he could do here was gift the enemy a lot of points. 290 points. Now, because these helicopters from the opposition are sometimes peeking over this ridge and this waterline, I decided to bring in a couple of Rolands and some Jeopards to make sure that this wasn't gonna go through. I also brought my Stinger helicopters to this flank, and I'm calling in a bit more. Yeah, this is them now. I want a bit more of these Stinger helicopters ready, because if they push across this water, I want to be sure that I can get them. Because those helicopters, even though most of them are transports, are still worth quite a bit of points. These helicopters are cheap. Let's see, I believe they are 50 points, 50 point helicopters. So these things only have to make 1 or 2 kills just to get their point value back. And later on in the game you're going to see them do just that. Over here another extremely dangerous run with an aardvark. And he actually lost 1 plane in the process. And we are starting to lose a bit of our lead. We're only up 220 points, which is not enough. Now shelling an Igla N here using my mortars. Again, once you fire these things, make sure they move. At this point I wasn't micromanaging them enough. So once this thing was dead, I should have micromanaged them, immediately stopped firing and get them to go somewhere else. But right now you can see me moving these things about. We're taking some mortar fire again. And this is what I thought was a really bad play. You don't put mortars in the front. You keep mortars in the back. This would have been a perfect position for them because they still had quite a bit of range. These things have 6.3 kilometer range, so even from back here where they were not as easily spotted by this Mi-2, they could still take a lot of stuff out at that range. And you're going to see that a lot of these things are going to get blown up. This is because you don't keep your arty in front of your front line. And because he was firing at his... the enemy was firing at his mortars, instead he accidentally, more or less, hit my ATGM, so I lost 1 more Milan, which I was not happy about. YOLO is pushing up with some more comvats, and these comvats are nice units. They have a good accuracy, but they have poor optics. So these things had no business being out here without being escorted by one of those Bradleys. Earlier on he pushed across this bridge with a Bradley. That was a lonely Bradley which was not backed up by any fire. They had no fire support from tanks or comvats. If you want to push across a bridge like this, you bring the comvats and the Bradley. Or the comvats, the Bradley and a tank preferably. Because that way you have a good all-round force which can take out tanks and infantry. But this was just pointless. You can see out here in front is the corpse of the Bradley. And out, sorry, this is the Bradley with the tow launcher on it. And now you can see a couple of dead comvats joining the corpse of the Bradley. Now, I'm spotting a lot of these helicopters with either my Fern Spears or my Tiger. I'm not too sure which it is. But by now I'm very happy to have all of my helicopters ready, all of my AA ready. And we're going to see quite a push on this flank. Putting down a defense marker by YOLO. He's putting down 2 defense markers, and let's just see what we have here. A lot of these are Mi-8 TVs. These I think are just regular attack helicopters. I'm not too sure, because some of the infantry transports also use this helicopter. So we got a couple of these Mi-8 TVs, 30-point helos. Still in large numbers, quite deadly because they carry a lot of rockets. We got a couple of Mi-24s carrying Phalanga ATGMs, more Mi-8 TVs, and this is where it gets more interesting. We find an Akula among the lines. Now Akulas are very dangerous units to both air and ground units. Interesting, by the way, that this thing still has its landing gear deployed. I thought they'd had an animation for that, but apparently they don't. Anyway, the Akula is armed with a couple of Vickers missiles, and these things are extremely deadly to anything that moves on the ground. Anything that moves in the air is going to get taken up by Igla V AA missiles, and they have an autocannon to top it all off. These things are 150 points, and I was really eager to get this guy, because he is by far the most dangerous unit in this group. So he's pushing across the water, and I'm still not sure if he's going to go for it. Because he did do a push like this earlier on and then retreated at the last moment. I wasn't sure that he was going to come in, so I decided to pull back because those Akulas were already taking fire. And this, I think, is where he took the bait. Because by now my Jeopards were starting to get in range and he was starting to lose helicopters. You can see fire from a lot of other sources now. My Rolands are getting involved, taking out some of these helicopters. Just gotta admire the beauty of Wargame for a bit. Notice also how when this thing crushes some grass, the grass actually disappears. Anyway, pushing back with my helicopters. And the helicopters are all disappearing back across the water. They did lose some of them, but not too many. And this is where it gets annoying. We get an Su-24 seaplane coming in. I didn't really realize it in time, so I was afraid of losing another unit, another AA unit here. Either my Rolands or my Jeopards. And immediately I turn off the weapon system so that they cannot be targeted by that SU. YOLO has not done that yet for this pivats. So let's see what this Su-24 is going to do the moment we see him again. Actually, he might have just retreated the thing altogether. I think I'm confusing this with another moment in the game. Alright, never mind. We're going to see that thing again and he is not going to be so lucky next time. Getting these guys back over my lines, and they still have quite a bit of missiles left. They only fired one Stinger. Still managed to kill score a kill with that. So I was happy with that. Again, pushing up with only one Bradley, and we can see that he has deployed another Spetsnaz GRU. Or actually probably the same Spetsnaz GRU in this building. The difference is that the Spetsnaz was taking a bit more fire now. On the right there is not really a lot going on. I'm doing a recon run with my Tiger and the Tiger just killed a T-80 back here. I did that from across this lake and I fired a 2625 meter ATGM at a T-80 here. You can still see the corpse. It is interesting that I managed to get away with this because normally if you put a couple of man pads in there you would easily take out that helicopter. Now, I think that by this time there were only 6 minutes left and the opposition was getting a bit jumpy. We were getting planes all over the place. I'm going to slow this down very much so we can really spot what's going on. MiG-29M bombing the same old location of my AA. He did not recon this position at all. So the Jeopards are firing at it, the Rolands firing at it, and this MiG-29M, very expensive plane, 150 points, is gonna get hit by a lot of stuff, and it is just not made for that. And there goes one MiG. Two more MiGs circling, and these are, I believe, the interceptors. Hang on. Yeah, these are the interceptors, 10.5 kilometer range. He's keeping them very close to the front line. And these things are not made for dogfighting. If you haven't seen my video on how to use interceptors, link is in the description below. These things are best used when they're back here. When they find an aircraft, like an airplane, because they don't have a range against helicopters at all, using their Wimpel. When you see an aircraft up here, you you unleash two of these MiG-31Ms. You send them this way, they fire their missiles. These missiles are semi-active, so they have to stay in the game before they hit. These MiGs cannot evacuate before those missiles actually hit their targets. But you can just safely keep over your own lines, whereas right now, this MiG is already quite far over my lines. He's getting right in the middle of the battlefield, the no man's land, and he is quite lucky that we didn't take him out. Having a bit more long-range AA in here would have definitely helped. But we only had a Chaparral here, which has a 2.3 kilometer range against airplanes, and the thing managed to get away. So, by doing that stunt with the helicopters and the airplanes, they gave us quite a bit of points again, and again we're leading by 900 points. So by now it gets to the point where we're going, okay, do we attack or do we not attack? And I was saying, no, let's not attack, let's have them come to us, because if we're attacking, we're losing, or we risk losing a lot more units. Spotting again the helicopter group. These things are apparently back for more, and I'm eager to hand it to them. So, moving up the Jeopards and the Rolands, getting all of these guys ready to fire. The 105Ps are ready to fire at these helicopters as well. And this was a bad play on my part. I had all of my AA exactly at the same location. And this is of course a nice target for my rocket strike. So this was a bad play on my part. I should have spaced these out a bit more. Helicopters also firing at the targets, and we're dropping a lot of helicopters here. Let's have a look at it from their perspective. They did manage to completely suppress all of these units, but they are still losing a lot of helicopters. My Stinger helicopters are out of ammo, so instead let's bring in the Tiger. Get a good visual on this Tiger, and the Tiger starts to take down a couple more helicopters. Very, very effectively, even scoring some multi-kills before I have it disengaged, because these things are getting a bit too close. Again, a couple more airplanes coming in, a couple of MiG-27s. Let's see what these things are armed with. They are armed with air-to-ground missiles, 50% accuracy, 28 AB power. They are nice airplanes. They are very, very good at killing ground units, if you have an eye on them. And I'm not sure that they have any recon in this group. The recon on these things is poor. So I'm not sure what exactly they were trying to do here, because this is just a sheer waste of airplanes. Now I still have a couple of airplanes in reserve. My F4F already came in. They are already trying to score a lot of kills, but those things have to be rearmed at some point. So my fighters were not available. And this showed quite a bit of bad play from our side, because I lost these guys here. No AA on this flank. And this MiG was just casually doing loops over this area. The Chaparral could barely get in range, and they managed to score a kill on one of my helicopters just using the main gun from this MiG. So, time to bring in my fighters, except they're not fighters, they are Peace Rhines. Peace Rhines are armed with Mavericks, but I'm not using them for their Maverick, I'm using them to get that AIM-9L firing. Yeah, I'm not sure why you're flying upside down, but it works for you. Okay. Gives us a good look at those missiles. You can see the 2 Mavericks right here, and the 4 AIM-9Ls right on the edges of the wingtips. 3.5 kilometer range against airplanes, 50% accuracy, 4 HE power. So these things are good enough to take down an airplane. And I'm just starting to hunt airplanes with these things. Just going after these Yak-38s, because my main anti-air fighters, or my main air superiority fighters, were out of play. They were being rearmed. I already had this resupply chopper here quite a long time. And I'm quickly getting as many of these Stingers back into the helicopters which I have left, just to make sure that I can have another go at these helicopters. The moment they're rearmed with full Stingers, I'm sending them back out, because we have quite a large helo push on this flank. I'm losing my Jaguar 2s here on this side, and as you can see, these guys are now starting to take down the helicopters. Scoring even a couple of multi-kills, because these helos were so close. This quickly got us about 150 to 180 points. Now, this is the other version of the Akula, basically. This is the KA-52. Long-range AA missiles again, Igla Vs, and KH-25 MPU these are SEED missiles, so long-range AA platforms. And here you go, another chopper down, but I do lose a couple of mine in the process. So bringing in my Tornado IDS. trying to get some of these guys, again with AIM-9Ls and their main Mauser autocannon, to get a couple of shots at this Ka-52. And I get the Ka-52, or the Eagle got it, I'm not too sure, I think he got it. But I did not really plan for a lot of counter AA here, and I lose the plane. But now we're leading by 1300 points. We got 2 minutes left, so there is no way that they can win this battle. I'm losing quite a bit of mortar carriers here, which was a bad play for me. I should have held them back a bit further. And by now Yo-Yo is having a YOLO moment, going in with all of these Abrams. And there were quite a bit of targets here. Let's pause it for a minute and switch it to their view. You can see that they moved everything they had across this bridge. Here's the Spetsnaz, VDVs, they have some concours, and they are fighting against one group of Abrams, so they think. Actually, they're fighting against, let's see, 2, 6, 10, 11... Let's round it up to 13 to 15 Abrams. Again, not a lot of Recon. So I try to get my Recon Tiger here to the front line as quickly as possible to get some eyes on these targets. But by the time it arrived, there was not really a lot left to shoot at. On the other hand, on the right flank, we were also taking quite a bit of fire. There were some MiGs flying over, and by this time he had apparently scored enough points that we won the battle. So, I was quite happy with this gameplay. It was a bit boring in the beginning. Interesting for me is that I only used 2 tanks in this game. I only used those 2 Kylers in the beginning. I didn't use any of the Leopards because I didn't need them. And this, I hope, shows you that you can win a battle without deploying a lot of tanks. Yes, I was playing quite defensively, but by doing that we didn't have to spend a lot of points on making sure that we had to resupply or repair units that we lost. And you can see that Yo-Yo did a good job, scored 1400 points, but lost quite a bit because he was sometimes a bit careless with his units. Now Yo-Yo, thanks for playing with me. I had a good game and I hope you did too. Let's see what the most unit kills were. And you can see that they're pretty spread out. There is not one single unit that got a lot of kills. The AA choppers did get quite a bit of kills here. Some of these MI8s. Peace Ryan got a kill in the Yak 38. But other than that, there were not any exceptionally long kill lists, which is how I like to see it, because that means that not everything is riding on a single unit in your deck. So, I hope that this replay gave you an idea on how to play West Germany. I know it's not the best display because I wasn't using any tanks, I wasn't using a lot of the units that I have in this deck. But still, even while using only a couple units, you can deploy a lot of very accurate fire onto the enemy. Hope you liked this replay. If you did, give it a like, and if you want to see more of my videos, check the description for the other videos I referenced in this video, or subscribe to my channel for more Wargame. Thanks for watching, and see you next video.